Her story is woven into the fabric of world history, reflecting on the remarkable reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest-serving monarch in Commonwealth history, and for most of us, simply a constant presence in our lives. Her passing, nothing less than monumental.
In the UK and around the world, an era has ended and a new one is beginning. 96 years of life, 70 years on the throne, and countless contributions from a woman bound by an unwavering sense of duty.
Not only Canada's head of state, but for millions, a symbol of stability. Someone with a deep connection to this country and a witness to so much change. What lies ahead in this moment of royal transformation? Good evening. Chances are you will remember where you were when you heard the news this afternoon.
An outpouring of emotion on an international scale, fitting for someone often referred to as the most recognizable person in the world. Her Majesty died this afternoon at her beloved Balmoral estate in Scotland. Queen Elizabeth spent more than 7 decades as queen, as the UK rebuilt from war, lost an empire, transformed its economy, and both entered and left the European Union. But her influence is limitless.
The impact of her loss will be huge and unpredictable. Our coverage begins with CTV's chief international correspondent, Paul Workman.
In a long life marked by milestones, the Queen's 90th birthday was perhaps the most significant. A moment of splendor and deep affection, shared with her husband Philip, with the nation she had ruled from the age of 25, and with a joke about getting old.
How I will feel if people are still singing Happy Birthday in December remains to be seen.
In an ever-changing world, it seemed there was always one constant, and her name was Elizabeth.
My lords and members of the House of Commons.
Christened Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, a princess destined to be queen by a royal twist of fate. With the abdication of Edward VIII in 1936, Elizabeth's father, the Duke of York, took up the crown, and the world began to notice his 11-year-old daughter, suddenly heir to the throne. She was famously pictured during the Blitz, driving an ambulance, the royal family doing its wartime duty. By then, she was already in love with a Greek prince she met as a teenager. 50 years later, she said they were still in love.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
Their first son, Charles, was still a toddler when life for the Windsors changed forever. With the death of her father, England and the Commonwealth had a new young monarch. She got to know Canada as Canadians got to know her. One of her last tributes, sending best wishes for the country's 150th birthday.
I have watched Canada develop into a remarkable nation. You have earned a reputation as a welcoming, respectful, and compassionate country.
Life for the Queen wasn't always pomp and ceremony. She faced her own horrible times. 1992, the year Prince Charles and Diana separated, to be followed by much worse. A terrible car accident in Paris. The Princess of Wales mourned in an outpouring of grief and shock. The Queen steadfast. In spite of rumors, she and her daughter-in-law never got along. The monarchy endured, and the next 2 decades brought new honors and triumphs. A golden jubilee, followed by a diamond jubilee, and the moment when she became the oldest sitting monarch in British history.
Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception.
There to witness the marriage of her grandson William to Kate Middleton, a future king, as she was once a future queen.
There you are.
Driven into lockdown by the COVID pandemic, like much of the world, yet finding new high-tech ways to carry out her royal duties. suffering through Prince Harry's traumatic and acrimonious break from the royal family, forcing him to choose between duty and his new life in America. And saying goodbye to her beloved Philip after more than 7 decades of marriage. Partners in life, partners in service to the British Crown. And it was alone that she celebrated her Platinum Jubilee, an achievement counted in years and the boundless affection of the British people. Refusing to give in to issues of health and aging, appearing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace 3 times. A life of duty and show accepted as both a privilege and a burden.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
A promise made and a promise kept to the end of her reign. Elizabeth II, Queen.
And this is the scene outside Buckingham Palace tonight. Mourners are gathering even at this late hour in the UK. And you can be sure that memorial will grow over the coming days. And CTV's Paul Workman joins us now from London. Paul, I mean, what more can you say about her life and legacy?
Well, she just had a stupendous time on the throne here, remembering she was just a young 20-something-year-old when she took over, fresh to the world, fresh to the royal circles, you know, and really just accomplished so much and showed so much finesse and strength right from the beginning to the very end, and she was still working at the end. Let's not forget that, Nathan. She received Boris Johnson at Balmoral the other day, the outgoing Prime Minister here, and then Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, and she looked good, she looked happy, she looked in pretty good shape. And then, of course, the shock today of hearing from her doctors that they were very worried about her condition and that she was under medical supervision. And though even though she was 96 and growing more frail, there's still a sense of disbelief here, largely because they'd seen her active so much so in the last 2 months, slowing down a bit, but nonetheless at the Jubilee, the Platinum Jubilee, which was just, I think, the highlight of her entire reign. And of course, now the country's in mourning and their queen is gone.
You know, as people look back on her life, do you think perhaps they're appreciating her even more now?
Oh, I think in this country they've been appreciating the Queen for quite a long number of years, partly through longevity, but also just the image she cast so wide, not just in this country, but across the Commonwealth, of course. She was really quite beloved, respected for what she stood for, as we've said so many times, this enduring life of service that she never gave up on. Even though she'd been through a lot of troubles and a lot of difficulties, she was always there, and she was always hugely respected and very well liked by all of the leaders who came through, who said she had a great sense of humor, loved to talk, and knew a lot about the world as she spoke with them.
And what do you think this is going to mean for the family? We know that Charles becomes king, but will this bring them closer together? What might happen?
Well, I guess we're all going to be watching to see if Princes William and Harry get together, and perhaps there's a family reunion, a little bit of one anyway. You know, sometimes in death, families come together. How will Prince Charles do? He certainly doesn't have the support and the love that the Queen did, and it may be possible that, you know, there will be changes. Perhaps the monarchy here will not be as strong and as beloved as it was under her, but those are for the days ahead, and it will be very much for Charles to try to bring the family together and show the same kind of strength that the Queen has showed. He's 70, don't forget, so he's coming to this very late in life.
All right, CTV's Paul Workman in London. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
This has been a day like no other. Grief, but also gratitude on full display.
The tributes are immeasurable as everyone processes this seismic change. CTV's Scott Lightfoot joins us live in studio with more. Scott.
Well, Nathan, a day of great loss is what Britain's new Prime Minister called it. It's a day many hoped would never come. Queen's specific medical issues had largely been kept secret, but it has been no secret over the past few months that her health was declining.
Through the rain, through the damp.
Welcome to viewers on BBC One. We have had news from Buckingham Palace that
it was over the noon hour, London time, when the BBC broke into live programming, the first major sign of what would be an historic day, a day that began with a statement from Buckingham Palace on the changing health of Queen Elizabeth II. Following further evaluation this morning, the statement read, "The Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral." The 96-year-old monarch had been in residence at her Scottish summer home since July, most recently deciding not to travel back to London to meet the new British Prime Minister just 2 days ago. Yesterday, she cancelled a virtual meeting on the advice of her doctors. An entourage of close family members arrived at Balmoral mid-afternoon, with Princes William, Andrew and Edward arriving together. Prince Charles also in attendance, senior royals flying to Scotland, another sign of the seriousness of the situation.
We send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers.
In the British House of Commons, the Speaker of the House paused the proceedings to offer best wishes as messages of support from leaders around the world poured in. In the pouring rain, Britons paused to reflect on the only monarch most had ever known.
I know she's in very good health, and I just wish she'd end her days in peace.
At 6:30 local time, another announcement from the national broadcaster.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
This time to tell the nation and the world that the Queen was dead. Following the announcement, a somber video over God Save the Queen. In a tradition that dates back centuries, news of the monarch's death was posted on the gates outside of Buckingham Palace, and for the first time, the same news delivered on social media by the royal family's Twitter account.
She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure.
Just 2 days after being sworn in, the UK's new Prime Minister paid tribute to the Queen and welcomed the King.
Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III.
A son in mourning, now the new King of England. In his first statement, King Charles III said in part, "During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held."
Well, the events of this day may have caught many off guard. The next 10 days are highly planned, and they have been for some years, as the nation and the world prepares to pay tribute. Michelle and Nathan, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. And here's a look at some of the key dates in the Queen's life. Elizabeth was born on April 21st, 1926 in London. She married Navy Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten at Westminster Abbey on November 20th of 1947. Her Majesty ascended the throne on the death of her father on February 6, 1952. The Queen was crowned on June 2nd, 1953 at Westminster Abbey, the first ever coronation to be televised. She became Britain's longest reigning monarch on September 9th, 2015. And Her Majesty celebrated her Platinum Jubilee, 70 years on the throne, on February 6th of this year.
Her Majesty accomplished much during her reign, never faltering on her commitment to serve. She was the 40th monarch in England since William the Conqueror obtained the crown. The Queen served with 15 British prime ministers, 14 U.S. presidents, and 7 popes. And she gave her assent to more than 4,000 acts of parliament. Her Majesty loved corgis, owning more than 30 over the years. But she had to spend time away from them on a number of occasions. The Queen visited 117 countries during her reign. She paid the most visits to Canada. So let's hear some of that praise for a person who lived a life of service.
Leaders from across the province and across the country sharing memories today. CTV's Queen's Park reporter Siobhan Morris is live with more. Siobhan.
Michelle, we saw people move to tears today, whether they'd actually spent time with the Queen or not. Even though they knew that this death was coming, it hasn't made the loss any easier. Inside a house of government named for her great-great-grandmother, just beyond her own portrait.
It is my sad duty to inform the House that Her Majesty the Queen has died. Long live the King.
Fighting back tears as MPPs agreed to pause their work until next week in light of the monarch's death.
Throughout her historic reign, she taught us the true meaning of selfless service and was respected and admired for her sense of duty and commitment to charity.
Wednesday will be dedicated to tributes to the woman many at Queen's Park looked up to.
We've lost one of our greatest public servants, I think, in the history of humankind.
Someone who felt familiar.
On a really basic level, she reminded us of our grandmother.
A symbol of curiosity and kindness.
You know, she epitomized that decency and caring and respect for everybody. And that is at the heart of how we live in Toronto, is everybody is respected by each other. And it started at the top.
For the Queen's representative in Ontario,
It's actually amazing that you mentioned that.
This was an emotional afternoon, signing a bill into law on behalf of the Crown, the last under Queen Elizabeth II, something the Lieutenant Governor didn't want to be missed.
How important a moment it was for all of them to realize what we were doing in Her Majesty's name.
You were much taller than me the last time we met.
The Prime Minister was just a boy when he first met the Queen. Now saying goodbye.
She was one of my favorite people in the world.
Someone who leaves a void.
I'm having trouble believing that my last sit-down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats.
Chats with a monarch he calls thoughtful, wise, and funny. There is a bronze statue that's already been built to honor Queen Elizabeth II. The legislature's been trying to find an appropriate place for that statue. I asked today if her death changes that timeline. The Speaker of the House says they're still working on finding the right place. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. The Queen was no stranger to Toronto, visiting several times over the decades, and we'll have more on those trips in just a moment.
Word of her passing met with shock and sadness in this city. CTV's Andrew Brennan is live with more. Andrew.
Well, Nathan, Michelle, along Queen Street, both buildings that are government buildings and otherwise, we see flags at half-mast here at City Hall in a city like Toronto, whose relationship extended beyond even her reign. Going before that, you have not only sadness and mourning, but you also have some shock.
When she died.
Visiting her cousin, Carmen Poulain hadn't heard the news yet. Suzanne Sewell said she wanted her cousin to enjoy her first time up the CN Tower.
She was not having a life for her, but a life for the people.
Sewell says she took her camera to see Her Majesty when she last visited Toronto back in 2010.
It was 12 years ago. You're just bringing back all those memories now of that moment.
British expats also mourning their monarch.
I grew up in London, England. I went to school there. We went to the zoo a few times. She was walking by with her kids.
On one of her first visits to Toronto, the Queen marveled at the city's diversity. Here, people from all over the former empire and Commonwealth live.
I'm from Mauritius, but the British had a big impact for us back home, so it's very, very sad.
The flags at City Hall aren't the only ones at half-mast. From Old City Hall and the Canada Life building to a billboard on the Gardiner down the road from the Queen Elizabeth Way, a larger-than-life goodbye for a queen with larger-than-life influence. And some of the biggest icons in Toronto, from the Toronto sign here at Nathan Phillips Square to the CN Tower, will be going dark tonight to mourn and say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II. Reporting live, I'm Andrew Brennan. We'll send it back to you both inside.
Thank you, Andrew. King Charles will travel to London tomorrow when he is expected to address the British people. He immediately became king upon his mother's passing. And we have a brief overview of the protocol now. An accession council is convened as soon as possible at St. James Palace, where the successor is formally proclaimed. But it may be months or even longer before Charles' formal coronation. The 73-year-old will be known as King Charles III, his wife Camilla, the Queen Consort. Prince William is now first in line to succeed his father, followed by Prince George and Princess Charlotte.
The Queen's passing has set in motion a carefully detailed plan that determines what will happen between now and Her Majesty's funeral. The monarch will initially rest in state at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, Scotland. Her body will then be moved to London on a royal train. The Queen's expected to rest in the throne room at Buckingham Palace for 4 days. The casket will then be moved in a formal parade to Westminster Hall, where she will lie in state until the funeral. Her state funeral will be held at Westminster Abbey, but details have not been confirmed. That day will be declared a day of national mourning in the UK. The Queen will then be laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, alongside Prince Philip.
For so many years here at CTV News, we have turned to Richard Berthelsen for insight into all things royal. He joins us live now. You are a royal commentator. Richard, given her age, you had noted this moment would come at some point, but what are your reflections at this time in history?
Well, I mean, this is the end of an iconic and long reign, one of the most successful reigns in our history. This is the longest reigning woman in world history, the second longest person in world history to reign, and the longest serving head of state. It's hard to overstate the significance of the moment for our own system of government, but also for the institution of monarchy, because the Queen really personified what it was to be a constitutional monarch in this era. I mean, people think of how you do the job, and they think of Queen Elizabeth II. And she's been very, very constant and unchanging in and around all sorts of turbulence and drama going around her all these years.
Only people of a certain age know a time without the Queen. What do you think the role of the monarchy will be without the Queen? What does the future look like under King Charles?
Well, Charles is going to be a very different kind of monarch. For one thing, we've had a matriarchy. Queen Elizabeth felt like a grandmother or a great-grandmother or a mother to the nation and to the Commonwealth. Charles is going to be in a very different role in that way. He comes to the throne much younger. There's going to be a lot less romantic attachment to him. The Queen came at age 25 as a young mother, working mother, obviously, balancing her family duties and her role as head of state. And Charles is coming with a lot written on his playbook, and some people have different opinions about that. So he's got a long and very, very quick road to go up to change people's attitudes about him. And I think we're going to see quite a lot of him during this transition to accept the condolences of people in a way that we've never seen before. A lot of countries are re-examining their link to the monarchy, and I think the Queen's death is going to hasten that, certainly in the Caribbean, with issues around colonialism, slavery. The legacy of Britain is too strong, I think, for the institution probably to sustain that. But constitutional monarchy is still a very successful form of government in many countries. countries around the world, some of the leading democracies, the healthy democracies, have a constitutional monarchy that separates the role of head of state and head of government.
We're looking at live images outside Buckingham Palace at this late hour in the UK. Do you see other royal relatives stepping up amid this new era?
Well, the royal family has become incredibly small because of a few departures. Prince Andrew obviously not taking on engagements anymore either. Other members of the royal family have departed because of their age. Some of the Queen's cousins are well into their 80s themselves. So the royal family is a much, much smaller institution, and it now rests heavily on Charles, but also his son, Prince William. And Charles is going to have to be supported by his sister and brother, Princess Anne and Prince Edward. And we're going to see a lot of them because they're really holding the whole institution. And it's a very, very large commonwealth with 55 nations. 15 of those regard the king as their head of state, and they're going to have to be visible amongst all of them to keep all the work going, because the Queen has been very visible through her reign, and she's traveled extensively.
CTV News royal commentator Richard Berthelsen, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
The Queen put duty first.
That was certainly evident in the nearly 24 visits she made to Canada during her historic reign as head of the Commonwealth, an unwavering commitment to Canada through generations. The first time Her Majesty set foot on Canadian soil was in October of 1951, mere months before she would ascend to the throne in 1952. Princess Elizabeth, as she was known at the time, made a cross-country tour with her new husband, Prince Philip, which involved a slew of stops in Toronto, an elaborate event that saw large crowds at every turn, from Exhibition Park to the University of Toronto's Hart House and even Maple Leaf Gardens, where the royal couple took in a game.
Following her coronation, a string of royal visits began.
As a newly crowned queen, Her Majesty embarked on a major Canada-wide tour. In 1959, welcoming U.S. President Eisenhower to Canada for the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The royal visit of 1964 saw Quebec's separatist demonstrations, and in 1967, attendance at Canada's centennial celebrations and Expo 67.
The Queen toured the grounds and buildings and joined in an event that was supposed to have brought a new understanding between Canada's founding races.
The 70s saw Queen Elizabeth exploring the Northwest Territories, British Columbia, Quebec for the Montreal Olympics, and several visits in Ontario. Huge crowds came to bear witness to the Queen in 1973, where she made a stop at Toronto City Hall.
And must rival those that have taken place in any other part of the world.
And in 1977, a big occasion in Ottawa to mark her Silver Jubilee.
During her 25 years as head of the Commonwealth, the Queen has seen many countries in political turmoil.
The 80s were marked by several more visits to Canada. In 1984, she and Prince Philip were in Toronto to help celebrate the city's 150th anniversary. Among the many stops, she officially opened Toronto's new convention centre.
We are all long for lasting international peace, but it is not likely to be achieved before we have learnt to live with our fellow men and with our environment.
And just as she had in decades past, the Queen traveled across the pond throughout the 90s, part of her duty to Canada. Here she is in 1997 during her visit to London, Ontario. 2002 marked Her Majesty's Golden Jubilee Tour and another visit to Canada's largest city.
I love her.
And once again, she drew crowds, some out of curiosity, but most to pay tribute. The year 2010 was the Queen's final visit to Toronto, a city that has sure evolved since she first took the throne.
Welcome to Canada. We love you.
Crowds of all ages and generations showing their enduring love and appreciation.
I can't believe this. I've waited all my life to see the Queen.
The city of Toronto notes in 1952, when she became queen, most of the city's residents were of British background, Protestant and Canadian born. Our population has exploded and has become so diverse since, and she's been a constant companion over the years and decades. And there have been 16 different mayors of Toronto during her reign, 12 prime ministers.
We're joined now by David Onley. He's the former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario and had a special connection to the Queen. Thanks for joining us. What are some of your memories from meeting the Queen?
Well, I suppose one of the first and most dominant memories was after being appointed Lieutenant Governor. going off to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen, and each new Lieutenant Governor gets to do that, as well as the Governor General. And so we went into the room, and of course, the whole facility is just palatial, hence the word palace. What the Queen said right up from the outset, now I understand that you have an election coming up in Canada. Ironically, the election, this is in 2008, had been held the night before, and I had been briefed as to what the results were, which were majority government for Prime Minister Harper, which was a bit of a surprise, actually. And I thought, wait a minute, she doesn't know that the election has already been held, and how do I correct the Queen? And so I didn't even attempt to correct the Queen. When she said, I believe you have an election coming up, I said, yes, Your Majesty, and as a matter of fact, I have the results for you. And so I was able to give her the results of the federal election, which just kind of brought back memories from history books of, members of the colonies, the Queen's representatives in the colonies sailing back to Britain to give the monarch the results and questions of the proceedings. So that was the first and very strong memory. There were other occasions, and each of them, the Queen was very engaging and took time to meet as many people as she possibly could, and didn't just engage in a quick hello, how are you, but asked pertinent questions about the individuals. And so back in 2010, when she came to visit the Lieutenant Governor's suite at Queen's Park, it was the first time that a reigning monarch had been at Queen's Park since the royal tour of 1939. And so it was a very, very memorable moment.
And why do you think it's important for Canada to maintain a relationship with the monarchy?
Well, I suppose, as various prime ministers have said, and that is that our transformation or the constitutional change process is so complicated. For instance, we need to have the unanimous approval of all 10 provinces and approval by the federal parliament as well. And you say to yourself, well, have you ever known that in your lifetime, that any 10 of the 10 provinces and the federal government were able to agree on anything? And so logistically, politically, it's just virtually impossible. So the best thing to do is make the system as we have it work, and where it can be changed, make changes around the edges. But having said that, it's a system that has served us quite well for, hundreds of years, really going back before Confederation, actually. So, it's a system that, despite its imperfections, is really something that we can work to make better, but take acknowledgement of the fact that it has served us very well for a long, long time. And, the reality is, too, that in the entire planet Earth, there's only 3 countries that over the last 150 years have been able to move forward with political change without violence, and the equivalent of a civil war. One is Britain, the other is the United States, despite their present problems, and the third is Canada. So if you're going to make a change, what are you going to change it to? And it kind of comes down to the process of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
All right, former Lieutenant Governor David Onley, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Our coverage of this historic moment continues shortly. These are live pictures now from Buckingham Palace in London. Stay with us. Well, it's been a beautiful sunny day in Toronto, but earlier, while we were waiting for word on the Queen's condition, looking at those images in Scotland at Balmoral, it was pouring rain.
Yeah, it was like fitting, a pathetic fallacy, if you're talking about, our feelings being matched by the weather, Lindsay.
It's so true. It was pouring rain in Scotland, but also in London, England. But then this happened. Take a look. I know that many of us have been talking about this. Not just a rainbow, but a double rainbow was spotted over Buckingham Palace, as well as other landmarks like Big Ben in London. And this happened just moments, really, before the announcement of the Queen's passing. So lots of rain, meaningful there, but the double rainbow, I think, symbolic for many also.
The images are just incredible to think that happened today.
Yes, but as you mentioned, we've had plenty of sunshine here at home. A really pleasant looking weather forecast, not only for the rest of our day today, but tomorrow and at least part of the weekend too. Weather is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train. Yes, we're going to talk about our weather here at home. We made it to a high of 26 degrees today here in the city of Toronto. We're currently sitting at 24, factor in the humidity, and it feels more like 27. Tonight is opening night of the Toronto International Film Festival, and if you're hoping to do stargazing, more than one kind, you can expect clear skies through the night tonight, and temperatures are going to drop in some cases into the single digits. In others, we're going to remain in double-digit territory. 14 for the overnight low for us here locally, and then tomorrow it's looking like a very summer-like day. 29 is what we're forecasting in Shelburne, feeling more like 34. Ajax 27 for you in Innisfil tomorrow afternoon, and for Cobourg, lots of sunshine, factor in that humidity, and it will feel like 32 at the height of the day. Here's a look at our current satellite and radar. Not much happening. We have high pressure locked in place really for the next couple of days. How is this going to play out? Well, we're looking sunny for Friday as well as for the majority of the day on Saturday. Late in the day, it looks like some cloud cover is going to increase and a few showers could develop to our north, but I do think the majority of your day Saturday will stay dry. Here's Hurricane Earl. It continues to strengthen. It's moving past Bermuda. A heads up for Newfoundland. This is one that we're going to be watching over the next couple of days. Could experience some heavy rain as a result of that storm. Our best chance for some rain is going to come into the day on Monday, perhaps late day Sunday as well. We're keeping an eye on that. And if you're already ready for a cool down, that too is going to arrive through the early part of next week. That's your look at the weather. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. And as we continue our special coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth II, we're joined now by the Honourable Sheila Copps. Sheila, through your work in politics, and I would think particularly in federal cabinet, you had the chance to meet the Queen on several occasions. What were those experiences like for you?
Well, I was responsible as Canadian Heritage for setting up those trips to Canada, and it was a most incredible broad spectrum of experiences. She dropped the puck at the Canucks game in Vancouver, and we were all involved in that because we were trying to get the Olympics for Canada, and really it was her dropping the puck. What people didn't know is she hosted a reception for all of the Commonwealth diplomats at the same time, and we got their votes for the Olympics for Vancouver Whistler. So I'd like to think she had not just a little bit to do about Canada getting those games. And the other side of Canada, she hosted the 500th anniversary of the arrival of John Cabot in North America. And that was another incredible experience where she literally, in a small town of 3,000 people, they hosted 30,000 people. And the Queen was just in her glory. She was fabulous.
Sheila, as we reflect on her passing today, what was your impression of her as a person? I mean, she is one of these figures that transcends time. I mean, so many people have this impression of the Queen, and yet you got to meet her in person. What was she like?
Yes, I met her many times. The first time, actually, when I was a member of the opposition and her statue was being unveiled on Parliament Hill. She was the only woman at the time on Parliament Hill, and she was astride a horse. And as you know, she loved horses, and she was here for the Olympics in '76. And she loved Canada, and she also loved nature. And I think it was sort of a marriage made in heaven because she traveled here more than any other Commonwealth country in the world other than her home. And she was very comfortable in more than one language. And when people were with her and you could see they were a little bit in awe and intimidated, she would always go out of her way to make them feel welcome and feel at home. So she was quite a special person. And I think she really took her duty to heart. I mean, every moment of the day she was at work, but in a really positive way.
Well, it really was a duty. Sheila, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today and offer those insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And stay with us. CTV News continues in just 2 minutes. There's a live shot outside Buckingham Palace. How the Queen's death is being marked at the opening night of TIFF. Tonight marks the start of the Toronto International Film Festival for 2022.
The proceedings impacted by the developments overseas. CTV's Andrea Case is live downtown tonight with more on that. Andrea.
Michelle, Nathan, good evening. I've got to tell you, I had to think about what I would wear tonight because you know me, I have my outfits picked. But I remembered what the Queen said once. To be seen is to be believed, and that's why she always wore color, and that's why I'm wearing my color tonight. Obviously a little subdued here on the red carpet, but for TIFF, the show will go on.
Listen to me! Listen to you by what right? Because I have a right to be, and I have a voice!
When it comes to royalty at TIFF, you could say the King's speech was a crowning moment. Screened in 2010, the film about Queen Elizabeth's father, King George IV's quest to conquer his speech impediment, went on to win Best Original Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Actor for Colin Firth. But talking to people today, it's television which has caught their attention.
But every time I remember Bridgerton, you know, you would think about Old England and, you know, that whole aristocracy, and the Queen fits right into that picture.
So my parents watched the entire series of Crown. Yeah, they really loved it.
Well, I did enjoy the Netflix series that they had. I think I watched the whole thing. And we're going to Elton John tonight, so I'm kind of sad. I hope he's not too sad. I'm thinking that he's going to maybe dedicate his show to her tonight.
While the Queen's granddaughter-in-law, Meghan Markle, was an actress before she married Harry, Her Majesty also made some memorable appearances on films.
I always keep one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
And while some people's thoughts are now turning to the monarchy and its future, the Nigerian film The King's Horseman delves into colonialism and its effects.
I think it's important for Nigerians especially to see that part of history and to hear the arguments, you know, for and against colonialism, you know, and the battle between cultures.
And so it begins. We're on the red carpet for The Swimmers, which is the official opening night film at TIFF this year. It's a story of two sisters who fled strife in Syria and became Olympic swimmers. So that is the opening night film. We will be here every night for the next 10 days, bringing you all the highlights of the festival. And just a reminder, Mirvish Productions is shutting down their marquee lights in honor of the Queen tonight at Royal Alexandra Theatre and the Princess of Wales. Reporting live from the red carpet, I'm Andrea Case. I'll send it back to you.
Stars Tonight is brought to you by Lastman's Bad Boy. Who's better? Nobody.
Returning to our coverage of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II.
Tonight in the UK and around the world, she is being mourned and honored. CTV's Scott Lightfoot is live once again with more. Scott.
Well, Michelle, news of the Queen's passing came as a surprise to many in the UK, across the Commonwealth and the world. The Queen photographed just 2 days ago undertaking her duties from Scotland. Now, mourners have been arriving there in Scotland and outside of royal residences across the UK since the news was announced over the dinner hour. This is a live shot of the crowds gathering outside Buckingham Palace. It's now approaching midnight there. As you can see, people continue to gather. It is expected the turnout will be massive for memorial events planned over the next 10 days, both locals and mourners who will come from around the world. Now, many outside Buckingham Palace expressing their admiration for the Queen, but some saying that stands in contrast to how they feel about the monarchy in general.
I can't really believe it, to be honest. I know she's getting older, but it's one of them things you never believe is going to happen.
I think it's very important historically and culturally. And yeah, I think, you know, regardless of what your views on her are, I think that, you know, she presided over a very important time for this country.
There'll never be anybody like her ever again that will serve so long. I mean, I know Charles now, he's king, isn't he? But I thought she was fantastic.
I mean, I think people have complicated thoughts about monarchies and the royal family and empires and things like that. I think that's okay, but she's like a really remarkable figure.
The new king and queen consort are expected to return to London tomorrow. That's when Charles will officially be confirmed as king. It's expected to be a couple of days before the Queen's body returns to London. A series of ceremonies and remembrances will then take place across the United Kingdom over the next 10 days. Nathan and Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Queen Elizabeth was Canada's head of state for nearly half of its existence as an independent country, and her image is still such a central part of our daily lives. An 8-year-old Princess Elizabeth was first portrayed on a Canadian $20 bill in 1935. She then appeared as Queen on the bills issued by the Bank of Canada in 1954. And through the decades, her portrait has been updated up to the current bills issued since 2012. They remain legal tender, but will eventually be replaced.
The Queen's long reign also played out on Canada's coins, with her official effigy on the currency changing over the decades. The Royal Canadian Mint says the Queen first appeared on Canadian coins in 1953. She's been portrayed many times since, including on special coins marking her Platinum Jubilee this year.
And Canada Post released a commemorative stamp in February for the Queen's Jubilee, but it was far from the first to feature her. She was portrayed at just 9 years old in 1935 and on a few other occasions before taking the throne. She appeared again after becoming Queen in 1953 and dozens of times since. Throughout her life, Canada Post says Queen Elizabeth was honored on more than 70 stamps.
Tonight, we'll have more on the death of the Queen.
An example of devotion to duty without parallel.
Heartfelt condolences from world leaders to loyal subjects after her remarkable reign. That's later on CTV National News.
Another live look at the gathering outside Buckingham Palace at this hour, where it is nearly midnight in London. The end of a day that people in that country and those of us around the world will likely never forget. While here in Toronto, Her Majesty is also being honored.
A city she visited many times during her reign. Let's check in again with CTV's Andrew Brennan at Nathan Phillips Square for more. Andrew.
Well, Nathan, Michelle, they used to say that the sun never set on the British Empire, but as it does set here and already has on the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, we've spoken to people that knew her or tried to get a glimpse of her as they were children growing up in London. This being one of the most diverse cities in the Commonwealth around the world. You have people that were former subjects as part of colonies that ended up becoming their own republics, like the Mauritius, still having a favorable view of her, if not the monarchy. People that would camp out or go to Queen's Park when she last came here in 2010. And as you can somewhat see behind me, as it's a subdued flag at half-mast. The flags not only here at City Hall, Old City Hall as well, and along Queen Street, named after the second longest reigning monarch in Canada, Queen Victoria. They are at half-mast tonight. And also later on, as it does get dark, we will ultimately have the sign behind me, the iconic Toronto sign, and the CN Tower will be dark in mourning for her. We'll send it back to you guys inside.
All right, thank you, Andrew. I'm just thinking about the forecast. It doesn't really reflect maybe how we feel, but that could be a good thing. It's sunny outside.
It's quite a lovely evening, actually, and we have several more nice days ahead.
We do. Enjoy this lovely evening. Temperatures are still in the 20s, mid-20s, in fact, in many parts of the GTA. Let's take a quick look at those temperatures. Factor in the humidity, and it continues to feel into the upper 20s in many areas. And when it comes to that sunshine, we'll have plenty of it tomorrow. A reminder that the sun is still strong at this time of year. So on the UV index, we're looking at a 7 for Toronto. So make sure that you're practicing safe sun. Take care of yourself tomorrow if you are going to be out and about. And then your 7-day forecast looks like this. Lots of sun for the start of the day on Saturday as well. Then an increase in cloud cover, chance of showers on Sunday, and then following us into the day on Monday. It's going to be a little more comfortable temperature-wise at that point. If you like the summer, enjoy tonight and tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Be sure to join Omar Sachedina tonight at 11 for CTV National News, followed by Sean Leathong with our next local newscast at 11:30.
In the meantime, our coverage continues anytime on CP24 and online at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Lindsay Morrison and all of us at CTV News, thank you for watching and have a good night.
Mais du coup, c'est un énorme traumatisme dans la famille, en fait. La situation, tu vois, ce serait pas un peu... Enfin, ce serait un message chelou, quoi. Ah, attends, bouge pas,